it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel. Broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Emily Zarka, your host for the Go Bag Challenge. Today we have Keith Tidball joining us. He's one of our judges and he has a really unique perspective about go bags, survival, and what to do for the apocalypse. We also have Athena behind the scenes helping us out. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook. She'll pop in and feed her questions to us and we want to hear your perspective. So make sure you stay engaged, listen closely, and definitely give us your comments. With that being said, I'd like Keith to introduce himself. Hi, Keith. How are you doing?
Hi, Dr. Zarka. It's very nice to be here today. Thanks for having me on, and thanks, Athena, as well. As you said, I have an interesting background. I actually, starting when I was about 18 years old, was in the U.S. Army as an infantryman, later became an officer, later was in the Foreign Service, applying some of those skills, mostly diplomatic ones, around the world, and then later joined Cornell University, where I focus on a number of things that have to do with what I consider the point of the spear or tip of the spear, including disaster preparedness and disaster response and so forth. So I'm happy to be here today to share some of those lessons that I've learned in that work.
We're so excited to hear from you. I'm just a prepper and generally paranoid person who's kind of self-taught in everything. So having someone like you with the training is such a valuable asset. So as an expert, what mindset do you think is essential for survival in any type of civil unrest or apocalyptic situation?
That's a really great and important question. I think this whole notion of zombification can also be applied to just basic naivete. The idea that either some municipality or government will take care of us in the event of a disaster is not a safe one. And also, just given all of the sort of changes we're experiencing at the ecological level and at the social political level, the philosophy must be that there's nobody coming; it's up to us. I think the startling statistic that I often operate from is that right now, as of today, 48% of Americans lack emergency supplies for use in an emergency. That's roughly half are completely unprepared. I don't know what that statistic is in Great Britain or Europe or some of our other allies and friends around the world, but that's a startling number. And so the philosophy that I start with is blue skies are when you prepare. It's too late when the apocalypse is upon you to get prepared.
We have a great question here from Charlotte Kendall on this point of, how do we sort of figure out how to prep differently for different scenarios? So, if you need to flee on short notice or you need to stay where you are to be safe, how do you prepare differently for those kinds of different possibilities?
That is a very insightful question. I always start with there should be always for everybody 3 levels of preparedness. The first is your everyday carry. That is the stuff that you need to have on your person and or in your vehicle to survive today in the event that some sort of surprise or shock were to overtake you. My personal everyday carry is I carry a small multi-tool. I always carry a lighter. I've got my little black Bic in my pocket and a couple of other key things. In the car are the things that you would need to survive. Water and so forth. In the second sort of tier, if you will, is your bug out or go bag. That's generally intended for 72 hours of survival and should be significantly more comprehensive, and we can get into that a little bit. And then the third sort of level is the sort of besieged bunker level, which you're going to be riding out an extended 30-day, 60-day, 90-day period of disruption, and you need to be adequately prepared for that. Now, within each of those 3 tiers, there are indeed scenarios, as the questioner points out, and you need to adjust your 3 levels or your 3 tiers accordingly based on some scenarios that you think are most likely. And the fact that you're thinking about that is the first step to being really prepared and ready to go. Those scenarios, work them out in your head and jot those down and develop accordingly.
No, I completely agree. I think that even just having these conversations and thinking about this idea of preparedness, like you mentioned, it's shocking to me that so few people here in the United States even have any idea about how to protect themselves or stay alive without, you said, the help of certain institutions that are already in place. I know I'm very intrigued by I love this idea of the three prong approach. I haven't made it yet, but I think I'm going to make a little on my person kit, because I have my go bag that I have in my car at all times. So it's with me at work, it's with me when I'm at home, but I think I'm going to make a little kit from like an Altoid tin that has some very basic things in there that I can, keep in my purse, keep in the classroom, make sure I have something. So if I'm working with an Altoid size container, what would you recommend is the number one thing I would need to have?
I go a little bigger than an Altoid kit. Mine's this big. It goes, it folds out, and it has a number of items. None of these are actually medical items, although it might look that way. I think the most important thing to have in a kit that you carry around is the things that qualify under the survival rule of threes. So number one right now is, it's hard to put it in something like this, but you need air. The most important thing in terms of that survival rule of threes is that you can live exactly 3 minutes without air. So if you don't have some sort of filtration in your kits, not just kit singularly, but kits plural, the rest is sort of superfluous, if you will. Then we get into, you can go 3 hours without shelter, you can go 3 days without water, and you go 3 weeks without food. Build your kit accordingly. In the Altoid kit right now, or the little micro one, for me, the most important things are a lighter I have in here. Again, I mentioned that. I've got a magnifying glass that can be used for all kinds of things, including to start fire, because there's another rule: 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So your kits need to reflect some redundancy in case one thing doesn't work, you have a backup. The other thing is a first aid kit, and I mean a first aid kit that has trauma items in it, so blood clot and so forth, for whatever you might run across in order to help others, never mind your own situation. And a compass is definitely something that is small and light and should be in your kit. Beyond that, we can get into some significant detail around the rule of threes and those things that qualify under 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, and 3 weeks.
So that kind of brings up another question. And I started my preparedness journey as a Girl Scout way back when, but I really got serious about having this go bag, or what I call my zombie apocalypse bag, in the back of my car when I was living as a single woman in Colorado and driving in the snow. So for example, I would keep a sleeping bag that had a pretty high heat point so I could stay warm if like my car broke down on the side of the road. But now I'm in the desert. And I know you have so much knowledge about different types of environments. So what can people do to know the area around them and know what they need, maybe in particular for their environment? Like for me in Arizona, something like sunscreen might be important, because I don't want to have terrible burns when I'm also trying to run away from a horde of zombies.
Yeah. Sunscreen will be important in a desert environment, but one should never underestimate the possibilities of very cool nighttime temperatures in the desert. So in the rule of threes, I mentioned the 3 minutes without air. The three hours without shelter in harsh environments is really critical. So you were prepared, it sounds like, for a more snowy environment with the sleeping bag. One should still be prepared to be able to stay warm in nighttime temperatures, even in a desert environment. And I would say space blankets and other micro technologies that are out there are important for that. That shelter piece is huge. You can't you can only last 3 hours, as a hominid out in the harsh environment.
Yeah.
So that's important to keep track of.
Keith, we have a question from Charlotte. She's curious in terms of air filters. Are you suggesting that you should have a mask or some sort of air filter in your kit? And if so, what?
Absolutely. N95 is a good one, or others. There are many on the market that are going to filter out particulates. This is really becoming important as we see the sorts of wildfire and other types of disasters in the West right now. It's tough to breathe, and literally, if you find yourself suddenly overwhelmed by a fast-moving fire or other sort of biological, technological, nuclear sort of incidents, you're going to need to be able to filter air and filter it well. So those masks are good choices. I would spend some time doing a little research online. They're harder to get now as a result of COVID-19, but it's worth having those in your kit. and in your vehicle.
That's such a good point that you brought up, because I have in my bag a whole little like stack of N95 masks, and I bought them about 2 years ago. And I was comforted by the idea that I didn't have to, you know, press the medical services or other people who need those masks more than I do right now, because I already had them, which I think is just such a good underscore to the idea of being prepared can't hurt you. Mm-hmm. I mean, having these things, even if you never need to use them, it's like 2020 is the year of things happening that we didn't expect, right? So I have some things, and I think that's just a really interesting and significant mindset you need to get in. So how would you recommend that someone starts their journey into that kind of survival mindset?
Well, and if I can put another question on here too, that's related, Liz Grumbaugh is asking, you know, what do you need to consider actually for a longer term survival go bag? So, you know, we talk about sort of these different levels, but, you know, what if you're really thinking about this sort of long term of even potentially relocating? What do you need to consider in this much bigger picture?
I think that's important to think about. And I also think it's important to make sure we don't get muddled in our terms. If we're using the term bug out or go bag, it means we're going somewhere. That means we're picking up a bag, likely on foot or on a bicycle, and we're leaving. If we're talking about bags that are in our vehicles, or bags that are in our homes, or bags that are in our camp or cottage or cabin somewhere, then we're in this besieged bunker world, and there's a lot more opportunity because you're not limited by what you can carry on your back while you're going in a go bag mode or a bug out mode. So in the sense of relocating, I think the best move is to start with, for example, ready.gov is a website that you may want to become familiar with. They have a pretty good introductory packing list for the home emergency preparedness kit, which would be that besieged sort of motion or action. In that, you know, you start with a big plastic sealable waterproof tub, and you start filling that with the items that you know you're going to need if you got 3 days to a week to survive. And then, you know, what it looks like after a week then requires a lot more planning in terms of food and water and stores and space for storage and whatever the incident or threat that you may be experiencing that's causing you to need to shelter in place. So there are different ways of thinking about these three levels, and I just want to make sure we're clear on terms. The go bag or bug out bag is intended to go on your back, and you are unhindered by carrying suitcases or big carts or bins, and able to move through the environment, defend yourself if necessary, help those that are less fortunate than you along with your hands free.
That's such a good point. Thank you for bringing up that definition, because yeah, that's something that I haven't pointed out yet, but my go bag is intended to get me to my next location where I do have more supplies and more security. Yeah. But speaking of being besieged, I think we have Neil is in a little bit of a sticky situation right now. What's going on, Neil?
Oh, hi. Yeah, you're a bit of a lifesaver, actually. I'm in a bit of a tight spot. I'm kind of like the opposite of Keith. I'm not really an outdoorsy guy. I'm not really a practical guy. I'm more of an urban kind of guy. You know, I like a flat white. You know, I own a kind of small brolly. You know, so I don't really. You know, I'm not well equipped here. I'm kind of the countryside. I'm getting out of the city. Feels scary here. So, you know, I'll take any advice you can give me.
Well, where are you now, Neil?
I'm in Salisbury in the UK. I'm on my way. I've left London. London felt like a terrible decision. So I'm kind of basically I'm tuning into all of the books. You know, 28 Days Later, Day of the Triffids, Get Out of the City, Head for the Countryside, and hope to meet some friendly military types, Keith.
We also have a picture that Neil took of his go bag contents here. I'm just going to share that so that y'all can see what he's got.
Okay. All right. This sensible shoes is a good call right away. I'm happy to see that. The hammer and the screwdriver also could be used for many different purposes. Keith, what do you think's going on here that's working or maybe needs improvement?
Well, I think he's prepared to fortify his space with a couple of shop tools, and he's prepared to enjoy some downtime with some recreation and some golf and some cricket. I'm a little concerned about the survival rule of threes here, though. I think I'd like to know whether the sheltering plan, Neil, is to stay in your basement there, or whether you're secure in the shelter department.
Yeah, it feels kind of secure here, but I mean, you know, you never know. I feel like my go bag is full of slightly therapeutic items, which might help me feel okay. You know, when there aren't any, when things are okay, but I'm not really very. I feel like there's some decent trades in there. I feel like tea. I feel like caffeine might be a good trade. Salt. I don't know. Maybe I could trade those
on the hydration side, Neil. The caffeine is to be avoided because it's going to contribute to your dehydration, and it's diuretic. So you're going to want water, just water, as much as possible, and avoid the caffeine if you're really on the go. The other thing is, in terms of shelter, if you need to leave the comfort and safety of your basement, you're going to need to have either some sort of emergency blanket or a little emergency shelter, or one of those cocoon bags, which I have one here I can show maybe here in a second, that is portable and lightweight for you to move out.
Okay. Is Amazon Prime still functioning?
As of now, I believe it is.
It is here, but I don't know about where you're at, but it's worth a try. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I think that you need something for warmth, and I don't think I saw any kind of fire starter. Again, talking about hydration, if you don't have a life straw or any other kind of water purification, you would absolutely want to have some kind of container and a way to start a fire to boil your water and purify it as much as you can.
Okay, that's good.
Now, what was the food items? I saw a couple of snack type things there, perhaps.
There's kind of there's some sort of an oat bar and a jar of honey. I don't know what the jar of honey is about. I just really like honey.
Honey's actually a good call. High energy food. So nice one there. I think you're going to want a couple more bars, and you're gonna want to make sure that you don't forget that after we eat food, we have to dispel food. So make sure you take care of your personal hygiene items as well.
Yeah, good. That's an excellent shout.
That's such a good point. That's something that I actually learned from I Am Legend. The book there's a whole storyline about the protagonist reading books about dentistry and the idea of like, I have a toothbrush in my go bag and in my survival kits, because you have to think what's going to happen if certain services are not available to us. And no one wants to be pulling their own tooth out. So definitely having some hygiene items would be helpful.
And, not to be indelicate, but personal hygiene, especially when it comes to latrines, is key to your survival. If you make mistakes in that department, it's going to come back to haunt you very, very quickly. So antiseptic materials and other things are real important if you're going to have to conduct your personal hygiene in more rustic conditions, shall we say.
So Dave Lundberg Kenrick is asking to see the go bag contents again, and I think it's worth us. Let's put it up again. And Emily and Keith, if you have any last words about things that Neil has done well or could improve on in terms of his go bag, it'd be great to share those.
I do. I think I don't want to dismiss the value of either the cricket bat or the golf club.
Well, they're kind of weapons, Keith, as well as kind of recreational items.
And, in the 8 categories after you get past air, shelter, water, and food, are clothing, defense, lighting, first aid, navigation tools, etc. Defense at the top of the list, you might have noticed. So I think it's not ridiculous to have at least one of those things along if you're comfortable and proficient in using it. And it may be defense against small animals, large animals, to include humans, etc.
Keith, I'm going to take not ridiculous, and I'm taking the positives there. So thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, something's better than nothing. You're thinking the right way. You're trying to come up with these ideas, and that's your step ahead of the majority of people. So congratulations on being able to maybe survive more than others.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks for the words of wisdom. It's a lifesaver.
Neil, one other thing, as you're thinking about defense, I would consider other multi-useful tools also, in addition to your cricket bat, to include a multi-purpose knife, which can be used in defense, as well as all kinds of other helpful things around your go path.
Okay, I'll try and trade my garlic and salt for a knife.
There you go.
Hey, maybe someone has a surplus. I know I always carry a knife on me because, as Keith mentioned, you can use it for medical purposes, for helping you get that shelter that we so desperately need, and for defense. So having a knife is an all-purpose tool in so many ways. So definitely add one of those. Like you said, if Amazon's still working, I would add that to the cart really quick.
Okay, I'll add that to my list along with the Nespresso machine.
Stay safe, Neil.
Yes, thanks.
We have some questions from the audience I'd love for us to have a chance to get to here. So Elizabeth Grumbaugh is asking about, so how do you start these conversations about prepping with other people who are in your household or in your extended network? And also, what is the, why is it important for it to not just be you who is the one who is prepping? What happens if it is just you and nobody else around you is participating in that?
This is a really interesting question. And I think one that this, idea of zombies or apocalypse can really speak to. I think one of the powers of horror and fantasy is being able to discuss really sensitive topics in a way that's more approachable. So maybe instead of bringing up a real world situation, you could frame it of, hey, do you want to be my zombie apocalypse survival team? What skills do you have? What preparation items do you have? And start the conversation that way. But Keith, what would you recommend for starting that conversation?
I think that there's two ways to approach it. One is, sort of blue sky thinking, like I think that the zombie apocalypse metaphor is really useful for. The other way is to, keep your eyes open for, I read Outside Magazine and a few others, and there's always some sort of a survival story where you can then use it at conversation at the dinner table. Hey, if this happened to you, what would you do? How ready would you be? And I find that people really engage the idea of thinking through preparedness, even though they're actually currently not prepared. It's like playing a game of Clue. And it starts people thinking about it. It gets them interested in it. And if you actually are prepared yourself, or you're into this kind of thing, you can feed their interest and be able to begin sort of like Athena's story. Feed their interest and help them become engaged in preparedness, which becomes fun, rather than something to dread if the inevitable apocalypse were to occur, so to speak.
Exactly. And that's sort of my own journey. Is I read so much horror and I was so invested in these fictional stories that it was a really good way for me to psychologically prepare for bad things that could happen. So I started taking survival classes. I learned how to shoot a gun. I started my go bag and my at-home survival kits, and framing it personally for me at this idea of apocalypse made it more approachable. So now I can talk about it with maybe not any less anxiety, but with more knowledge than I had previously. But Athena, how did Keith help you start on your journey for survival?
Yeah, well, so I personally, even though, we've been using this idea of the zombie apocalypse to engage about issues of preparedness and kind of, what potential disasters are possible for a long time, honestly, I was really paralyzed about starting a go bag, and Emily, we'd had some great conversations, and you're like, yeah, and I have this, and, these shoes, and, this shortbread style, what is it, like high energy rations,
high calorie bars. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this all sounds great, but like I just couldn't bring myself to get started, because I felt like, well, I was going to do it wrong, or I was going to not have something in there that was going to end up being essential. So I really just felt paralyzed by it. And there was a turning point for me when actually Keith and I were doing field work with a group of people in Gulf of Mexico area in Mississippi. And we were sort of chatting, and I admitted that I did not actually have a go bag. And Keith gave me a hard time about it, as he should. And then he turned around and very generously gave me the kit that he had inside his go bag for first aid. And he was like, here, use this, get started. And that kind of got me over my paralysis. So I think, sometimes just having someone who is a friend who is like, hey, get started, here's something. And Keith actually inspired me to do this for my brother, actually. So for Christmas, I was like, what am I going to get my brother? It's like, oh, well, why don't I get him a bunch of stuff for a shelter in place kit, because I knew that he didn't have one. And so I found a bunch of stuff to get him started and sent that all to him. So, you can.
That. I think that idea, this idea of human connection and cooperation is so important. And I like to think of survival as what, the flight attendants are always telling you on a plane, right? You have to secure your own mask before you can help someone else. So Keith, was confident enough in his own survival and preparedness that he could give you that bag and start your journey. And I know I've gotten that's the thing I feel like about being someone who has this preparation mindset and preparedness mindset is I get the calls all the time from family members who, again, right now in the world are saying, like, we might be evacuated because of a fire right now. What do we need to have in our bags? And I have to tell them, don't forget that you have 2 pets. You have to make sure you have their medication, their food, stuff for their survival and shelter and warmth. And so I think that by being open about your preparedness and your survival, people want to approach you and ask you questions about that. And I think that the more we can normalize being prepared, that those conversations can only get better.
I 100% agree with that. I just for clarification, what I gave Athena came from my everyday carry, not my go bag per se. It was just the ruck that I carry around. And I did have to remember an important point here, to replenish that trauma first aid kit for my everyday carry when I got back home. So remember always to replenish if you happen to use one of your items. That's an important thing to keep track of. And I think in the broader sense of this whole preparedness notion, it is part of our genetics, our DNA, our the essence of who we are as humans, to survive and to be prepared. It's only in the recent history of our species that we've developed some sort of amnesia about our necessity to survive and be able to be prepared to deal with pretty much any kind of threat. So I believe that getting back in touch with preparedness and so forth is also a way, in a broader sense, of getting more in touch with who we are as humans in our societies, which are rapidly changing right now. And so there's a lot of additional benefits to getting involved in preparedness and preparedness planning and training beyond just the obvious utilitarian ones.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's so many good conversations that can stem from that. Like you said, going back to our roots as humans and as animals, but part of that means you have to get to know the environment around you. And so then we have to start thinking about conservation and environmental security. And I think that, again, just normalizing the conversation around preparation can only have good benefits for our survival and for the future survival of the world, let alone humanity.
Indeed. Well said. I think one of the things that we often shy from talking about in these contexts is the need for protein. So perhaps this is for another conversation, but in the set of things you need to deal with the survival rule of threes, when it comes to the food section, you may not be able to pack everything you need to survive, especially if it's for longer terms. And that's when some skills need to be brought to bear that aren't necessarily top of the list for a lot of people in terms of acquiring protein out in the world, whether that's fish or other meat. So we could have that conversation when the time comes, if there's interest in that. But I think it's an interesting entree into this broader idea that you just mentioned, Dr. Zarka, regarding the environment and our role in it, and how preparedness is a portal or pathway into thinking more deeply about our role in that environment.
Absolutely. And I know personally, as someone with a shellfish allergy, that I have my protein options are also limited. So I'd love to have that talk. So we'll definitely have you back so we can get a little bit more into the detail about feeding ourselves for the apocalypse. But any final words from any of our correspondents?
Well, I just want to say, Keith, we can't wait to have you back for an episode of Eat, Pray, Run to talk all about food and eating during the apocalypse, because I have a feeling that you have some tips that we could all benefit from.
I have some things to share regarding procurement and preparation and presentation, all of the above when it comes to the food side of the equation.
Well, I will certainly be tuning in for that one, because I know I need some help in that department.
Well, it's been really great being with you all this afternoon or this morning, depending on what time zone you're in. So thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on Go Bag Challenge, and stay tuned for the next episode. We're going to be answering more questions and helping you survive the apocalypse, whatever form it may take.